Good evening, everyone. It's another beautiful day in Napa Valley. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the final one of our iGourmet virtual tasting series. It's been a lot of fun learning how to make some delicious but relatively simple dishes to pair with our wines and to see what's going on in the vineyard. So thank you all for joining us for one, many, both of this series. So it's nice to have you. And I actually see a few new faces tonight. So thank you for joining in. Just a little housekeeping. Most of you know the routine. Click on the participant button so you can see who's with us tonight, and you can click on raise your hand if you want to raise your hand and ask some questions. We do allow you to do that. And we also have the chat button, so be sure to watch the chat because we will also get the questions from our friends on Facebook Live who are too shy to show their faces like you all do with us on Zoom. So we do get those questions and post a lot of helpful information and links on the chat box. So be sure to keep an eye on that. And we're doing a little poll to see about timing for the next series, if we want to make any changes to that. So you know how it goes. If you don't vote, you can't complain. So please do participate in the poll and see if we should move our timing up or forward, and or if we should keep it as is for the next series starting August 13th. So thank you again for joining tonight. And I hope everyone has a glass of, I know it's everyone's favorite Sauvignon Blanc in their glass, and you're having a little sip of it because it's delicious. So, and it's a beautiful day here and at the ranch where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc at Dollarhide. We don't get a really good signal. So Michael Garcia, our viticulturist, was out there earlier today and took some shots of us to show us what's going on in the white wine variation of Sauvignon Blanc, where, you know, we grow about 8% of all the Sauvignon Blanc in Napa Valley on our Dollarhide ranch. You all know that that is our own field selection of Clone 1. We've been propagating for over 20 years, makes up the majority of all the Sauvignon Blanc that we have. And, you know, Michael selected those vines over 20 years ago for their expressive fruit and fantastic characteristics, and grapefruit and green lime, and just that really great intensity that we get from the Clone 1 field selection of St. Supéry out at Dollarhide. So I hope you're all enjoying that. Let's jump to Michael Garcia and see a little bit of white wine variation, as we haven't had the opportunity to do that yet.
Hi everybody, I'm Michael Garcia. I'm the viticulturist here at St. Supéry. Right now we're in parcel 14, one of our only hillside Sauvignon Blanc parcels here at Dollarhide Ranch. The vines are currently going through veraison, which is a ripening period for the fruit, where we see much more sugar accumulation. We see a drop in acids, and the fruit clusters themselves start to change colors. Not so much in the whites as the reds, but we do see a little bit of color change in the whites with a thinning in the skins. So I'll pull a cluster off for you so you can look at it here. And where there were small green berries about a month ago, we have a full cluster, very juicy, thin skins. These are at about 16 to 19 bricks here on the hillsides, a little less on the flats where they're ripening a little more slowly. So that's what we're going through in the Sauvignon Blanc right now. In about a month and a half, 2 months, these will be getting crushed and made into wine.
Yeah, so, you know, just kind of interesting to think about the veraison process in the white grapes. You're just getting a little bit of that golden color that they're turning from green to a little bit more translucent as we go through veraison. And I think Michael's comment about 16 to 18 degrees bricks, those of you who are with us in the early series, our assistant winemaker Asael talked a lot about bricks, and we'll discuss that and the picking decisions as we move into the harvest series. But for a point of reference, 16 to 18 bricks is really close to the table grapes that you're eating, and we're going to go for a lot more ripeness than that, you know, getting up to 22.4. sometimes even a little higher bricks, because of course Michael is making the picking decision based on flavor. But just to give you an idea of how sweet the grapes will be compared to those table grapes, it's always a good point of reference. Let's jump to Michael Scholz, our VP of Viticulture and Winemaking. He is in our favorite parcel of Merlot at the Rutherford Vineyard. Michael, we've been watching this parcel since it was dormant with you. So show us a little more of Veraison and what we're getting with the color change here now in Rutherford compared to those white grapes Michael Garcia showed us.
Sure. Yeah, listen, hey, I'm standing here on parcel 31, our Merlot parcel. Everyone's that's been on board for a while here would have seen this parcel a number of times. So let's take another look at what we've got here. And this is it here. You'll see that we've got quite an excellent canopy, which I mean by size of volume of leaf and shoot growth, which is outstanding. We have a nice bright green colour in the leaf, which is excellent because it suggests that we've got good condition within the canopy. And that's important because we have a long maturing season to go ahead with here, and that's going to put some stress in the vines. So we want our vines to start this sort of stage of the season in a pretty good place, and they look like they're at that, which is the goal, and that's kind of exciting and excellent to see it. But from a point of view of Veraison, in a Sauvignon Blanc, we see, well, in all grades, we see Veraison occur. Veraison, as Michael G was explaining, is the softening of the berries, thinning of the skins, and changing of colour. So in a Sauvignon Blanc, it's a little more difficult to see, although it is still apparent. But on camera, it's harder. But on reds, it's much easier to see. So let's take a look at what we got here. As we go along here and we look at our red clusters, we'll see some clusters with varying colours, and then we'll come along and we'll have a look at something like this. So this one's a beaut. So you see a cluster here that's got some purple berries, some fairly red berries, but still some green berries. So what happens is when the berries are formed during flowering, which is earlier in the season, back in like May. And so as the berries are formed, they're tiny little guys, and then they start to fill out and grow along through the season. But they remain as this very hard green sort of pea. So when you look at this sort of green berry right here, it's sort of a hard sort of green pea. And then if you feel it and you squeeze it, it's pretty firm, pretty solid. But if you move up to one of these other ones that's got some good colour in it, it's kind of soft and squishy. And in fact, I can quite easily pull off the stem. So that's sort of the nature of Veraison. So in reds, it's quite easy to see because the colour change is so obvious and what's going on. But it is the start of the maturity season. So it's the start of the time where grapes are going to start ripening towards their fruition, towards the harvest date. And as a plant, its general concept is to reproduce. So it wants to ripen its seeds and drop its seeds. From our point of view, we want a great glass of wine. So that ripening enhances the ability to achieve that great glass of wine. But this is the starting stage of this ripening process. As Michael G had outlined out in the field, depending on your variety, depending on your location and your elevation, is where your ripeness starts when it comes out of Veraison. But generally, something like a grape like this, we're going to see this come out of the hard green pea stage into Veraison. And when it comes to Veraison, it will generally sit in the sort of the 14 to 16 bricks mark. And so at that point, we have a way to go. So we're not going to think about harvesting till somewhere north of 23 bricks. And it's all dependent on flavour and structural content and the quality of the tannin phenolic components and so forth. So bricks is not a be-all and end-all decider. It's more the phenolic content and the flavour. But bricks is still important because it dictates the alcohol in the final wine. So that's what we'll do. We'll see that. We'll see how it goes as we go forward. And you can see as you walk along through the fruit zone in these grapes, we've got a lot of raisins complete, what have you, but it's not entirely done. So we're on the way though. So yeah, here we are.
Looks great, Michael. It is definitely a beautiful day out there in the vineyard. Quite lovely. And, we've been looking not just at grapes coming in, but for the next harvest season, we're looking at what our fantastic produce is coming in. Chef Tod, tell us what you've been seeing out there, the culinary garden, and what's peaking and we should be seeing in the next season.
My pleasure. it's a lot of fun to go out in the garden now as we're really in the peak of summer. So being able to walk out there, going out first thing in the morning before it gets a little bit too hot, it's nice to be able to see the growth day by day. Sometimes you'll see tomatoes that are slightly green, and then the next day, just from that intense sunshine throughout the day that we have, that not only ripens our grapes, but it also ripens the tomatoes that we have. So I'm seeing a lot of different types of things coming through. Our corn still has a little ways to go, but we are getting a lot of beautiful summer squash. I've been using those on some of the previous dishes that you saw. And it's always my main focus to really zero in on our estate first to see what we have available, and then kind of design the dishes around that. So really show off and utilize the fact that we have estate produce here. It doesn't get any fresher than that. We can wait until it's really ripe off of the vine and then just snip it right off the plant, right into the kitchen, and then right into the dishes as we need to. So I'm finding everything from squash blossoms that are a beautiful garnish that can go on, from some beautiful toy box or heirloom tomatoes, everything from tiny little currant tomatoes all the way up to the larger heirloom tomatoes that will soon be ripening soon. But a lot of our toy box tomatoes are ripening now, so you've got that bright acidity, you've got the wonderful kind of texture and that wonderful flavor, the sweetness that comes through. So I thought that would go really good with our dish today. So I'm going to put some of those onto our risotto dish that we have, and you probably got the recipe along with the invite, as well as the ingredients, hopefully. So I do have some of our heirloom tomatoes here, and I basically just took some of them and washed them and peeled them down, or cut some of the larger ones in half. I also have some Thumbelina carrots that I pulled, so we have these beautiful kind of stubby Thumbelina carrots. I just thought I would shave these and serve them as kind of like a crisp, kind of a fresh contrast to go onto our creamy, rich risotto that I'm going to be making. Any kind of edible flowers and fresh herbs. The recipe calls for herbs to go into it. Any sweet, fresh herbs go really well with Sauvignon Blanc. So it's a great way to showcase a fruit characteristic in the wine by coming up with some kind of green, fresh herbs. In this case, I've got chervil and some parsley and some chives from our garden as well. So all of those in combination with some of the products from iGourmet should make for some really delicious risotto, especially designed to go with our Sauvignon Blanc, for more along the lines of like a white wine risotto dish as opposed to a heavier salad.
Yeah, I'm really excited to try this dish because you've done a lot of wonderful risottos, red wine risottos that we've had and are posted on the website. And so it's fun to have the summer risotto. So I'm excited to try it. It's going to be delicious. Michael, tell us a little bit about the winemaking and how you created this style of Sauvignon Blanc for us here at St. Supéry. It's been a little while since you first made the very first Sauvignon Blanc at St. Supéry.
Sure. It has been a little bit. Yeah, I was fortunate to create this wine, this style, and the first one that I was involved in to bring this style around was in 1996. So we've been doing this for quite some time, and it's a style made with purpose. It's, of course, it's driven by the vineyards. It's driven by where we grow our grapes and our location, our site. It's very much a terroir wine, but at the same token, as a winemaker, you do make sort of a decision about style. This particular wine is an unoaked wine, so it takes a little bit of a leaf out of that sort of Southern Hemisphere book, where you see all those winemakers down there making those wines that don't have any oak influence or barrel fermentation, what have you. And this wine sort of follows that. But we aren't Southern Hemisphere. We are California, and we are Napa Valley. In fact, we are a state St. Supéry. So it's quite unique. So we respect the winemaking style, but we still, of course, reflect who we are, and that is St. Supéry, Napa Valley Estate Sauvignon Blanc. You know, I grew up in Australia. I grew up in a place called the Barossa Valley, which is one of the old wine districts. Well, it's almost not quite, but was one of the oldest wine districts in Australia. Probably the most renowned. It's kind of like the Napa of Australia. But close by there's an area called the Adelaide Hills, and I was involved in doing a lot of winemaking there, where we made some Sauvignon Blancs and what have you, very much in this style. So when I had the opportunity to work on the St. Supéry wine, well, you know, that was front and center of mind, and so we came forward with that. When the goal, of course, with the style is to present a wine that illustrates the fruit and exactly your location and what can be achieved from your vineyards. And it was mentioned earlier about our clonal selection and what have you. And we actually have, when I arrived at St. Supéry, I was very fortunate as a winemaker to have some really outstanding assets in Sauvignon Blanc, being the vineyards that have been developed long before I came along by Robert Scholz. And one of the vineyards he developed was this really cool parcel of Sauvignon Blanc. And so I quickly learned that that particular parcel was a very powerful Sauvignon Blanc with tremendous Sauvignon character, true sort of typicity, and a great sort of opulence and drive and expression and what have you. And that was quite clear and became clear very quickly that block was a little bit special. And so, as was mentioned earlier, we've propagated those mother vines into other vineyard parcels, and now it's become the core of what we do. And therefore, we have a very consistent approach year by year of the Sauvignon Blanc we do achieve, which is Sauvignon Blanc is driven by those sort of grapefruit and pink grapefruit aromatics, driven by green lime, sort of lime zest, citrus approach, and often with the thread of fennel or caper in a subtle moment in the background. So that's the sort of approaches we're achieving, and we're looking at that very old parcel there, which really is an incredible asset that we have. I mean, old vines are there's a little bit of magic in an old vine. They really do produce incredible wines, and wines that have just a little bit something special, a little bit of integrity, really kind of spectacular. And once you got an old vineyard like that and they're doing such a great job, you hang on to them because you can't plant an old vine. It's kind of unique. And so what we do when we come to the winemaking is we start, obviously we go through a season of grape growing, which we've talked to you a lot about the last few weeks. And there's a lot that goes into grape growing. We touch the vines an enormous amount of times, and it's our craft is a very labor-intensive craft. We have to be out there. We have to have hands on the vines multiple times through the season. And but you know what? We're trying to make an excellent glass of wine, and that's all the cause of what we're trying to achieve. So once we get to a harvest decision based on flavour, and we check the chemistry and what we're doing, and understand our acid profiles, our sugar profiles. But at the end of the day, it's flavour that really counts. And because we have a consistent vineyard, we know what that flavour is going to be because we've been doing it for some time. But we make a harvest call, we decide to do that, and then we initiate our harvest at night. Now, when I say at night, it's typically somewhere past midnight that we'll initiate harvest. And we'll have a lot of sort of hands on deck to try to help this out. And the reason we start the harvest then is because it's very cold. We have an enormous diurnal swing on our properties, and that means that while we can have warm days in our Mediterranean sort of climate that we have very cold nights. And the cold nights allow the clusters that are hanging on the vines individually to chill down. And so when we harvest them cold, it keeps the cluster in a great state so that we can maintain the integrity of the cluster, of the grapes, of the berries, all the way from the vineyard to the cellar. And so by maintaining integrity of those berries, which is easier when they're cold, we maintain quality. And that's the key of what we're trying to do with everything we try to achieve, is maintaining that quality. And so we harvest at night, we bring those cold clusters in, we bring them to the cellar, and then we put them into a press and we squeeze those bunches. Now, a press does exactly that. It basically gently squeezes the berries because they all go in this whole berry format. And that's all to maintain sort of elegance and subtlety within the juice we yield from there. But when we press, we squeeze those berries, which extracts all the juice. And the juice goes, and that's a press in front of you right there. So, and the juice goes to our tanks and then sits in the tanks for a number of days, and we settle it because the juice will look a lot like a bottle of orange juice in the store. It has pulp that settles out. So we let that rest and let that pulp settle a little. Then we take the clean juice off the top and we initiate a fermentation. That gives us the ability to create a wine that has outstanding sort of purity and quality of fruit and expression of Sauvignon Blanc aromatics and flavor profile, and particularly our Sauvignon Blanc aromatics and flavor profile, because we are consistent and very unique in what we achieve in that grapefruit, green lime and citrus sort of situation. Fermentation sort of carries on. That typically takes 2 or 3 weeks to get that through. We keep it cold, we keep it slow, And the reason we do that is that helps us retain vibrance of fruit, it helps us retain opulence and so forth. So we continue to do that at a very slow, chilled sort of pace in the fermentation. Once that is complete, we allow the wine to rest a little, maybe only for a couple of months at best. And then we go through and analyze all of our different wines and our lots, and we create a blend, and then we go out and form that blend and then prepare the wine for bottling. And so the goal is to capture that wine and keep it in a very young, vibrant, fresh state. So it's very fresh, very opulent, sort of exciting wine. So you see it, it sort of bounces from the glass a little because it's got great aromatic profile, great expression. And, it's a real sense of Saint Supéry in our terroir and our Sauvignon Blanc and exactly what we are. So that's sort of a little about how we go about getting a glass of wine.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said that's really interesting is that diurnal shift and how much cooler it is at night at the ranch, and just the ranch also being high elevation, we really get, even down into the, high 40s, low 50s quite regularly. And then, peak daytime temperatures in the 90s. So it's quite a big swing, keeping that freshness and that vibrant acidity. It's really lovely. Gary and Paula Reeves say it's their family's favorite Sauvignon Blanc. I know it's mine, obviously, but it's really delicious. And I know you also are growing a lot of produce and love to grill. Tell us what you like to drink this wine with, because I personally just start cooking with a glass in my hand because it's delicious.
Yeah, look, what do I'll enjoy, if I'm grilling, I'll enjoy a glass of wine, Sauvignon Blanc while I grill. But what do I serve it with? I mean, I have a garden that I'm an amateur sort of gardener, but I really enjoy being able to go home at night and be able to go out and pick fresh produce. So, I have most of the goods that can create a salad out there. And so I'll do a salad, and maybe I've got some cucumbers. I might create a cucumber salad and what have you with vinaigrette type of dressing. And with that, I'll pair with this wine, with this estate Sauvignon Blanc, because with the vinaigrette dressing, it's got the acid, and they sort of match a little bit, and it pairs very, very well. I might some cherry tomatoes on there and so forth, but keep that sort of light and sort of simple. And our Sauvignon Blanc is opulent, and vibrant, and fresh. So to have fresh produce is a great way to go, I feel. From a grill point of view, I mean, I lean on the salad type of thing, but maybe I grill some shrimp or on the grill, skewer some shrimp and just grill it, and then place that on your salad. Or otherwise, if we're getting a little bit more serious, I might grill a sort of a light white fish, like a tilapia or something, and create something with that to pair with Sauvignon Blanc. I don't know, a few different ideas.
Yeah. Well, Chef Tod did give us a fantastic Kampachi shrimp recipe. If you missed that one, you can go back on the YouTube channel and watch it again, because that is an excellent pairing. And Alan Fulp is asking, what is it about your process or the Napa soil that achieves the grapefruit and citrus notes?
Tough, Alan. That's a tough question for me to answer. It's really not that we're doing something to achieve it. It's that we have this. We're fortunate to have this incredible asset, and the asset is that terroir. It's a combination of our soil, of our climate, of our microclimate, of our location, of our vine stock, which is the root stock, and the clonal material we have on top, which is all Sauvignon Blanc. Well, we just happen to have this combination that creates it. It's not like we can choose to create grapefruit once we receive it in the winery. We can't do that. It's either in the field, it's in the vineyard, or it's not in the vineyard. And so, but vineyards are consistent typically. And so for us, these are the flavor profiles that we achieve from our site. And we're really custodians of the land and have the good fortune of having that presented to us, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Susan wanted to know, did you mean shrimp on the Barbie?
Maybe. I'm always confused when how to present that here. Is it shrimp or is it prawns? I'm not really sure.
Well, you must have missed that session because Todd explained it to us. Let's jump over to Todd, because I know that Samantha's cooking away and she might need a few of Todd's tips to finish up her risotto. Todd, tell us what you've got going for us tonight with this beautiful risotto.
My pleasure. So we do have a risotto going, and it is one of those kind of dedicated dishes that you have to pay a lot of attention to. So for me, it's a lot of fun because it's really cooking from scratch. You're putting a lot of time and attention into it, and there's a lot of stirring, gentle stirring that's going on here. Because really what you're doing is taking an Italian rice or your arboreal rice, probably from your iGourmet kit, and you're turning it into from a really hard rice kernel all the way into this creamy, delicious kind of a vehicle, and this basically like a starch in itself that you can flavor in a lot of different ways. So by having this arboreal rice and treating it in a very classic way, you can come up with a wonderful texture that pairs up really well with a lot of our wines. So a couple things that we have, you may have already started up, and I started on some of my preparation for this. In the recipe, it calls for actually chopping and softening up a lot of onions. So the first step is basically having some really small diced onions. These are sweet onions, and I don't want them to be raw or crunchy and give a really strong taste. So what you do, the first thing is start off with some butter, put your onions in there, some salt, and then over very, very low heat, over maybe a few minutes or so, you have to cook them softly so they basically essentially sweat or they turn translucent, nice and sweet. The next step is to actually add your rice, your arboreal. So you're going to put your rice in there and kind of toast it in the oil. You're going to warm up the rice, then coat it with olive oil, and it basically prepares it to be able to absorb the stock that you have. Your chicken stock that you have from iGourmet, you want to have that in a separate pot, and that should be hot as well, so that it's going into your risotto pan at the same temperature. You want this constant cooking to occur at all times. Here's our beautiful cheese that I decided to select to go into this, to especially show off our Sauvignon Blanc. And this is from Cypress Grove up in Arcata, which is in Northern California. And it is a fresh goat cheese that also has two really cool components. One is fennel pollen, so a little bit of that licorice note that Michael was mentioning, as well as some lavender. So there's some floral components to it. So Jimi Hendrix would be really proud. So I've got some crumbled up cheese here all ready to go. I mentioned that I do have also some of our tomatoes, the beautiful tomatoes. And also one of the things in your kit that I thought would be a nice little punch of citrus in here is to actually put in some preserved lemon. Now the preserved lemon comes already done for you, right? So you have this jar if you got the iGourmet kit. You can utilize this for a lot of different things. It's a Moroccan ingredient that is used a lot of times in tagines, but you can put it into vinaigrettes, into risotto, all different types of things, salad dressings. I find it wonderful. So on the inside, you're going to find a pulp that you need to cut out and remove. And you're basically looking for just the thin part of the skin, right? So that's zest essentially with all the other parts removed, and then chopping it very finely. So I'm going to fold this into it, add a little pep into the risotto at the end. I mentioned that I also have some butter. So you want to finish off and have some butter to add some richness to it. I'm not going with any sharp cheeses tonight because this is going with our Sauvignon Blanc. So you won't find any Parmesan Reggiano, any hard aged cheese or anything like that. But the whole process basically, and I did have to start this up myself earlier. So you can imagine that the time involved that you were working on this would be a little lead in time. And you want to have everything all set. You want to know that your table setting is all ready to go. You've got some wine poured in the glasses and everybody is ready, maybe having a nice conversation while you're stirring and stirring. And so the whole process from the time of the onions to toasting the rice to then gradually adding a ladle at a time until your rice or your risotto is just up to the level the same, and then being able to stir it to develop that creaminess, because the risotto is going to cook from the outside in, and then you want to be able to stop or finish the dish so that it still maintains that nice al dente kind of a texture. And that means it's got a little mouthfeel to it. It's got a little bite to it still, and it's kind of different from your standard rice. So that's the unique and interesting part about it. It has a little bit of texture in there. And so as this is coming up to temperature, I can see the bottom of the dish. I can see there's a little creaminess in the bottom of the pan. So I know I'm pretty close to being done here. So I'm going to give it a quick taste. I'll definitely season as we go with a little bit of salt. That texture's good though, so I'm going to shut it off because I don't want it to overcook. And the reason being that as soon as I finish this, I need to get it onto the plate, not to the guest, because it will continue to overcook if you don't serve it right away. So you want to make sure that it doesn't become gummy and starchy and really thick. I want this still to be fairly loose. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add some of our butter pats. It's going to add richness, it's going to add a little creaminess, and that nice mouthfeel texture. And then I'm also going to add some of my purple haze cheese. So I'm going to fold this right in at the end. I'll save a little bit for a garnish over the top. There's a wonderful combination of chevre or fresh goat cheese and Sauvignon Blanc. There's a classic pairing in France. You might find that with some of the Sauvignon Blanc from Sancerre, along with their fresh goat cheese. Something about that kind of richness that you find in the goat's milk, along with the slight grassy notes sometimes, but it's always a wonderful pairing. So immediately as this cheese is kind of melting and this is all coming together fairly smooth, you can always adjust it a little bit more if you want to just to touch on the softer creamy side. So that's why you have that stock and it's hot. You don't have to wait for it to come back up to temperature. And so now that you got that creaminess, I can really smell the fennel pollen coming out and the lavender blossom that's in there. It's beautiful. So I want to get ready to serve this as soon as I can. Keep in mind that the recipe did call for putting in a splash, about maybe a quarter cup worth of the white wine that you actually are drinking. So your Sauvignon Blanc is built into this. That acidic background in there kind of helps to cut through some of that richness that you find. But I can actually cook it and concentrate it down before I go in with my first wave of stock. And so that's part of the recipe process.
Now,
So
Todd,
as opposed to finishing the wine at the end where it's going to taste a little bit raw, I prefer to use it in the beginning so that I can finish it that way. Go ahead, Emma.
I was just going to say, my husband always says, does he have to keep stirring? And I tell him yes. Am I pulling his leg, or does
No,
he really
he does have to keep stirring. You really want to develop that creamy texture on the outside. If you don't, it'll cook unevenly. So you want to be able to put some of these fresh herbs right over the top. You can also fold it in and just mix it all into it. But another ingredient that you want to put in is your preserved lemon. And so by putting in some of your preserved lemon, you can garnish just a touch over the top here. You get these little individual bites. Mix in some so that it incorporates inside as well. And that's not so much to be sour. It's more or less going to be a nice amount of kind of a perfume. So every bite that you have there is going to be delicious. I'm going to go ahead and garnish with some of our vegetables. There's some of those wonderful shaved crunchy carrots. Again, sweet right out of the garden just today.
We're not getting a full view of the plate. Can you pull it a little towards me?
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. We need to see all the perfection.
Great, there we go. So tomatoes, love the bright acidity that you pick up. You know, you're really picking up a lot of the color, what's going on in our garden now from the seasonality and the terroir, everything that's happening.
That was just
Garnish with quite a few of these. Give it a nice little punch, and they do accent well with goat cheese, the tomatoes on there. That's a really nice touch. Some fun other things. Now, this would be great as it is. If you were going to serve it just like this, you want to garnish with maybe just a little bit more of your fresh purple haze right over the top, like so. Another fun ingredient, I'm always looking for interesting things to utilize some of our products that we have on the estate, and our happy chickens up at the Dollar High Ranch have been laying eggs like crazy. So we have so many eggs, and I'm trying to think of ways that I can utilize those eggs. So what I did was separated out the yolks, and I did what's called a salt curing method on this. So I took these eggs and I layered salt underneath in a pan, took the yolks and made little craters and set them in, and then covered more salt on top. And I did that on Monday. So as of this morning, 4 days later, I removed them. I basically washed them off lightly. They firmed up almost to the point where they are like a firm, almost like cheese. I guess you could say the texture is like a firm cheese. And so it basically cured it. It's salted on the outside. You still have the wonderful concentrated flavor of the egg yolk. But it's something I thought that would be great to grate right over the top. And so I'm going to shave these and just let that egg yolk richness with a little salty pep on there. I think that's another component that can add a lot of flavor to it. And our wine definitely has the crisp acid to cut through any of that excess richness or anything that you might find in there.
Did you have the eggs in the refrigerator while you did that, or were they sitting on the counter?
So while they were curing, they were in the refrigerator.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll be refrigerated the whole time. They're in the salt. You can take them out afterwards. You're going to wash off the excess salt. You can put it into a low oven to continue the drying process without the salt. And then you can also use a dehydrator, which I happen to use. So I put these into a dehydrator for a couple more hours at a low temperature, about 150 degrees, until they come up like this. Now, if you want to add some seafood to this or any kind of proteins, you can. But I really enjoy it the way it is. But if you happen to have maybe some beautiful sustainable seafood like some shrimp, or maybe you're working on your sustainable seafood recipe, so that you can submit that, maybe win a wonderful trip out to come and visit us, and I can cook your dish as part of the contest. Here's some beautiful sustainable shrimp that I poached in some of our Sauvignon Blanc ahead of time. I love that really soft, slow technique of cooking them very gently. And these are basically some shrimp that you can just put on. And it's kind of interesting because you may not think that they're going to go well with the goat cheese when you're adding seafood with goat cheese, but it actually works. Maybe it's part of the California cuisine in me, the way that I've learned to get a little creative with dishes. But I've found that sometimes with fresh goat cheese, you can be a little bit adventurous and work some of these other components into it. So trying things like fresh seafood with that chevre, maybe it's the herbs and the purple haze that really bring it all together. But I think it's a fun kind of a vehicle that you can work with. So there's some beautiful chevre. I also have some wonderful flowers from our garden. So it's, again, an expression of our terroir and what's happening out there, what it looks like, the seasonality. These are Nasturtiums. They add a little bit of peppery characteristic to it.
Oh, beautiful.
So I have some, just mostly for looks, but this is, since there's fennel already in there, these are fennel blossoms from some wild fennel that's out in our garden as well. So I can just put that on the plate as eye appeal, kind of eye candy to really pull it all together. So that's one way of enjoying a Sauvignon Blanc style of risotto that has some wonderful goat cheese and some herbs, and then the seafood or not, whether you choose to, whatever type of crisp, fresh vegetables, and it's got that nice kind of cured, salted egg yolk over the top there. This is
Gorgeous.
a more savory style of dish that I think would go well with this.
We had a few questions as you were going along. Emily said, massaging the rice, it makes it so creamy, which I thought was a great way of talking about the stirring. And then
Massage. Yeah.
Brent wanted to confirm that we're using just the lemon skin, not the pulp inside.
That's correct. Yeah, the pulp can be a little bit on the bitter side. So you do want to get and remove the inside pulp, that center section there. It's also really concentrated with a lot of the lemon juice that's touch on the salty side. So in this case, I'm really looking at the zest on the outside for the aromatic characteristic of it. So I trimmed that all down. I thought that I would take another opportunity here to showcase some more of our fun things that we have that I'm working with right now. So beyond the Sauvignon Blanc, let's shift gears just a little bit because I want to showcase some of our beautiful dollarhide fruit. This is another ingredient that just came to me. And
Todd, before we do that, can I ask you another couple questions? Because we've got a few folks still stirring. So how long will the eggs keep after you've cured the yolks?
So those will keep probably for about 2 weeks if you have them refrigerated in a Ziploc bag, airtight. Keep them in there like that because they are essentially cured. They're firm enough. There's not a lot of moisture in there, and they have a nice salt on there to be kind of a antibacterial on the outside there.
Any other seafood you would recommend other than shrimp?
Oh, some nice scallops would be really nice if you wanted to do a quick sear on those or even poach them. I've even experimented before and had some pretty good success with, believe it or not, thin strips of smoked salmon with some goat cheese and that risotto. That might even be a nice one. And it could still pair up very well with our Sauvignon Blanc. Those are great questions and great thoughts.
That sounds delicious. And then if you can't get preserved lemons and don't have the 6 weeks to make them, you
could definitely use some fresh lemon zest in place of that. If you have some lemon zest, that would work. Otherwise, you can always get these from iGourmet, so they have that product. So that's the nice convenient part about it. I know that I always take some of our excess lemons that we have here on the estate, and I'm always keeping a jar of them going. So it is a wonderful commitment, but you can use them for a lot of different things in the future.
Yeah, I love having them in my refrigerator. I always have some on hand.
They're really nice, yeah. So I have another type of a risotto I thought I would do, a variation here on a sweet or almost like a rice pudding. So ahead of time, I started off and I made a batch of, believe it or not, like a sweet stock. And I used the same arborio rice, minus the onions, minus any of the really savory ingredients. And I kind of par cooked it off just to save some time to show you this. But I took a vanilla bean. You can use vanilla extract. There's a little bit of honey in here. And there's also just a tiny bit of some of the Moscato wine, along with mascarpone cheese. So if you remember the mascarpone cheese from last week, it was in your iGourmet kit. I utilized that. I had some extra, so I thought I would put that into the actual stock that I'm using, and I'm making essentially like a sweet type of a rice pudding. So the same idea, I'm going to stir it, it'll get creamy. I can put just a couple pats of butter. It's the same idea. So what this is going to turn out to be is almost like a vanilla and Moscato scented creamy rice pudding made with arborio. So you have another option of using that arborio rice, whether you make red wine risotto, white wine risotto, or in this case, a sweeter Moscato. So anytime that we're pouring and using Moscato as a dessert wine, it's not necessarily a sweet dessert wine. It's like an off dry, but I want to make sure that it doesn't overpower by sweetness the actual wine itself. So the food in every dish that I do is less sweet than the wine or the same amount of sweetness. From our Dollar Hide ranch, Michael Garcia, who you saw earlier, brought me down a lot of stone fruit. So much to deal with. That's why I'm thinking outside the box a little bit and doing like a cold stone fruit over a warm rice pudding, rice risotto dish here. So these are nectarines, these are beautiful dapple, fire, pluots, and these are peaches from our Dollar Hide ranch. And what I did was I took them and sliced them up ahead of time. And I splashed a little bit of our brandy, our Moscato brandy. And this is our Andrew Jackson Dollar Hide Moscato brandy, as well as utilizing some of our Moscato, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. That was in part of the actual cooking liquid that I put into this rice dish. There's a tiny bit of cinnamon sugar on here for a little spice characteristic, but there is a splash of some of the brandy on here. So I'm going to use this as a simple kind of accented just slightly and put it over the top of that rice. So I'll put just a little knock of the mascarpone cheese in there for richness, creaminess.
Oh, yum.
Remember, there's vanilla in here. You can smell a little bit of that orange blossom, that Moscato stone fruit characteristic. And so this would be, and you may not want to serve this the same time you're serving the risotto as the main course, but I'm giving you another hopefully an idea or creative option to be able to use this. This would be a lot of rice. This being said by somebody who absolutely loves rice. So
well,
here,
you're sharing dessert, right? It's a share plate.
yes, of course. So here's some of those beautiful colors. You've got the hot and warm kind of combination, nectarines, peaches, pluots, cross combination that has tartness between an apricot and a plum. A little bit of that hint of the brandy from our Moscato grapes. And then another fun component that I love to put on here is actually some basil. This is micro basil. You might think it's kind of unusual. We think tomatoes with basil, that's the easy one. But I always really love the spice component that you pick up. So I'm gonna pick these tiny little micro basil leaves and just scatter them because I really like the way that it plays with the cinnamon spice that you pick up from there, as well as the sweetness in the peaches. So just a little bit of that micro basil on top, I think is a really nice touch. Goes with the Moscato. I wouldn't necessarily have this with the Sauvignon Blanc because of the acid and the kind of flavor profile, but as far as showing off two other kind of fun wines that we have that we carry, I think that's a really nice way to utilize that risotto. So a little bit more of that cinnamon sugar, and again, utilizing product, I actually dehydrated or made some of our peach chips. So these are crunchy. I can use these. Just slice them thin. You can put them in a low oven and let them kind of crisp up. You can have them as a snack. I thought I would put them in here, so I've got a little crunchy contrast in the textures. So as you take a bite of them, they're crunchy. You can actually crackle them. They're wonderful over if you're having salad, maybe a cereal in the morning, something like that.
I love the combination of texture and color and heat and cold, the temperature things. It's just like a delight in your mouth.
A little more, yeah. I definitely put some thought into the whole, you know, each bite and what you're picking up. There's some beautiful colors, wonderful flowers from our garden. So again, it's that nice kind of combination of sweet, savory, just a little bit, and utilizing and showing off some of the best of what we have available for the season. So between the two of these, using risotto as our base and maybe having the basic technique of cooking the risotto itself, you can experiment a little bit, have fun, try some of the seasonal fruit that you have, even some berries. You could make a warm vanilla scented arboreal rice
Gorgeous
dish. That'd be a wonderful way to finish off a meal, as well as having maybe your main course, your entree course, with or without beautiful sustainable seafood and a glass of our Sauvignon Blanc. Everyone knows how to get our wines. If you wanted to pick up some more so you can experiment and have fun, you can get onto our website. Some of you are in our wine club, which is fantastic. We appreciate the support. But by having all of those at your disposal, it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to have fun with some of these dishes. So hopefully I've been able to, over the past 6 weeks with some of these iGourmet convenient items, kind of give you just ideas on how you can come up with some of the perfect pairings. And by all means, please experiment and have fun. There's really no wrong answer to it. You can just keep trying and experiment. You'll find some winners that you can write down. And if you do happen to have some of the seafood recipes, please pass them on, send them to us, and enter your name into the recipe contest.
Yeah, Todd, thank you for that. And I just want to say, you know, I think one of the things that makes your desserts really stand out to me always is they're not too sweet. And that Moscato is about half the sweetness of your typical Moscato. And it really needs to, you made the point, you know, your dessert should not be sweeter than the wine. And I think that's really important. One of the techniques that I notice time and again with the desserts that you make, just fabulous. And both of these wines, the Moscato and the Sauvignon Blanc, are distributed nationally. So you can also, if you run low, like some of us who are drinking these regularly during the summer season in particular, you can also check the wine finder on our website and locate those at a retailer or restaurant near you. And as Todd mentioned, we are getting towards the end of the Great Sustainable Seafood Tour, only another month or two to go. And we'd love to see your recipes turned in on the Great Sustainable Seafood Tour for that judging. You can win a trip to Napa Valley, and Todd will be cooking you lunch. So it's worth practicing and submitting those recipes. We hope to see you at the winery soon. And if not, we hope to see you online for the next series, because it's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to have access to Michael and the whole winemaking team. We're going to be showing different components of harvest, what's going on in the vineyard, the key decisions that we're making throughout. And Todd is going to be cooking the bounty of the garden and putting a few things away for the winter season. So we have some more things tucked away for delicious treats throughout the year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And we so appreciate all of you joining us and spending your Thursday nights with us. We'll miss you next week, but look forward to having you back again. And we appreciate you joining us. So we'll see you next time. And in the meantime, be well. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers.